blind, you can't see anything. And I don't really like it when people compare it to blindness. We shouldn't really be comparing anything, but I feel like sometimes it's the most easiest way that people can understand. So quite often, with blindness, they're sort of isolated from things, whereas with deafness, we're isolated from people. Because deafness is a communication barrier. It's not a cognitive disability, and sometimes it's perceived that way, that if someone is deaf, they're also dumb. Again, these are phrases that I don't use, but because sometimes they resonate with people and they understand. Again, in the world, we don't like to use these terms at all. But so going into further about the spectrum, now there's different modes and ways that people with a hearing loss or deafness like to communicate. And one of the main forms that you may be familiar with is sign language. And I like to also think of it as making us better communicators. Quite often when we see someone signing, it shouldn't be the case that we're so fascinated, wow, they're speaking in sign language, which is actually the case. Just like Azima is here today, it should actually be something that everyone should learn as a skill to prevent that barrier. If you think about it, there are two different worlds. There's a silent world or deaf world, and then the hearing world. And the deaf world are being kept in isolation, and the hearing world, the world is hearing, but how are we bridging that gap is the biggest question. Now, there's also people that are in between, and they're known as the in-betweeners because they don't categorize as deaf people, and they don't categorize as hearing people. And I'm also going to go into what I mean by that with my own story. So I'm someone who was diagnosed with a hearing loss around the age of 3 or 4. Again, that's unknown because it's actually quite difficult to detect a hearing loss. And the reason why I provided that education is because I would like to encourage people to, if they suspect they may have a hearing loss, the sooner you get it detected, the quicker you seek support, the more you can help the person or yourself. Because quite often what happens is it does lead to cognitive issues over time. Let's say a child has a hearing loss at the age of 3 or 4 and it goes undetected and you don't know how to communicate with this child. This child has been kept in isolation and then you identify it at the age of 10. They may not have a language. They've been kept in isolation. They will be prone to cognitive issues. So to prevent that, we like to ensure that people get early detection and take early intervention in place beforehand. Now, when I was diagnosed with my hearing loss, so my entire family is hearing, so that's why quite often people say to me, actually, you're not deaf because you can speak so well. Again, there's a misconception that deaf people can't speak. There's a misconception that all deaf people can lip read. Lip reading is something I do. I didn't realize until I was about the age of 16 that I actually lip read. I read lips. So for me to be able to communicate, I used to constantly be looking at people's faces and reading their body language, which is actually really important. And again, those aspects come into communication. I didn't have any cognitive issues. I was just relying on other modes of communication because I wasn't hearing the sound. So if you think about it, if I say a word and I might not hear one letter of the word, and then my brain sort of has to process exactly what's being said. Any high frequency sound is usually what is missing. Again, going back onto the spectrum, hearing loss is a massive graph. There's frequencies, there's pitches. Based on someone's voice, the way the sound actually gets delivered, it's different. The accent you speak is different. The quality of sound, like right now, when I'm speaking, the sound is actually echoing back to me. So that is also different. Even you hearing through this mic right now, the sound is different. And I don't even know how well I actually hear my voice sometimes. So that's the reality of it. And it took me to what I'm working on now to actually realize how I've been able to come so far. Because it is somewhat a miracle, I believe, and the reason why it's a miracle is also because Um, Otherwise, if someone doesn't do anything about what I'm doing at the moment, then I don't know who will. So, for example, a lot of people would say to me that there's something in my voice which is different, and it's considered a deaf accent. But again, I don't sign, I read lips, I speak really well. So it's like, okay, you're not deaf, you're hearing, but I'm only hearing because I have something called a cochlear implant, which is artificial ear in my left ear. If I take that out, I'm profoundly deaf in my left ear, but I have 40% hearing. Again, that isn't enough to perceive speech. So the moment I take my cochlear implant off, I cannot hear what anyone's speaking. I will be dependent on lip reading, and I will not be able to pick up a phone and hear on the phone in my right ear. But I'm able to do that with my implant. Now, I only got the implant done about 7 years ago. Before that, I used to wear hearing aids. And again, it still fascinates me how I managed with just hearing aids that long. Now, so but the work that I'm actually doing at the moment is I've actually moved from the UK. So my background is in education. And it was always close to my heart that, you know, I want someone to grow up like me and have role models in their life. Because when I was growing up, my entire family was hearing. I didn't even know sign language existed until I was a teenager. Now, that shouldn't have to be the case. If there's 480 million people in this world with a hearing loss and about 1 million people in Pakistan, we need to start seeing it. We don't see it in our media, we don't see it in any representation, there's not enough advocacy for them. When that starts happening, slowly they will start to feel heard. Because honestly, even today, I won't be surprised if I am probably the first or second person that a lot of people in this room are meeting with a hearing loss. In fact, there's actually a lot more, but there's also a lot in numbers that are going undiagnosed because there's a massive stigma around it. The moment we start to change that stigma, just like we did with glasses back in the day. So back in the day, glasses were perceived as something that geeks would wear. Or even today, there's very few people in Pakistan that I would see that are able to sign and they are hearing to bridge the gap. The moment we start changing these perceptions and removing these stigmas, people will feel accepted and heard and understood. Now, those are the sort of main things, but the main thing that I'm actually working on at the moment in Pakistan is improving the education that's being provided to the deaf children. So I'm working with an organization called Deaf Reach, and we're working on a project to launch satellite campuses around Pakistan. Because as I said, there's 1 million deaf people in Pakistan, and the access to education that we want to provide them in the mode of sign language. Because sign language is a natural language of a deaf person. Just like you can see right now, I just have this habit of wanting to move my hands. I'm not signing because I never really got to fluently sign with anyone until I moved to Pakistan. So now with the work that I'm doing, I'm fully invested in actually learning the language. And the biggest thing I can ask you all to do is that sign language should actually become a national language. The moment we start to make it a national language, we will start to include them. Not only that, we'll start to close the barrier between the deaf and the hearing world, and people will start to feel heard and understood, because it's not going to take your hearing away from you. It's only going to make you a better communicator. In the United States of America, it's now fashionable to use baby sign language. People are signing to their babies before they start speaking because they know it will help with the development of the child. So they're using baby signs. Now, if that's something we can start to do as a nation, where we make sign language a national language, and we understand it is going to make us better communicators, I believe you would be one of the first nations to actually do something, because there are very few. There's a lot of countries that are actually still even fighting for that, to even add it to the curriculum. There's mainly, I'd say, developed countries that have actually got that far. So yes, thank you.
Thank you, Reach, for sharing your story. And I'm sure people are getting a real insight into how much this is needed in Pakistan. We don't realize that, like you said, 1 million people are affected by this, and we don't realize because we don't know the stats. But thank you for spreading the awareness, for doing the work that you do. I wish you all the best. Do we have time to take questions? Okay, so we will move on to our next talented individual here to share her story. इनका जो इनिशिएटिव है उनका नाम है औरत औरत की दुश्मन. इस पे आप वो स्टार प्लस के साउंड इफेक्ट्स भी इमेजिन कर सकते हैं. We have here the very talented Yusra Amjad, and I would like you to share your story, please.
Okay, hello, everyone can hear me? इसका echo बिल्कुल zero हो सकता है? ये zero पे है? चलें, कोई बात नहीं, आपने कोशिश की है. ठीक है, ठीक है. Oh, no. So self-important. Nothing I'm going to say is very podium-y. I also, जब मुझे बताया गया था, मैं भूल गई थी कि हॉल 1 कितनी मैं एक ज़ाती और जज्बाती बातें करने की नहीं मेरा ये प्लान था, लेकिन मैंने then I remembered हॉल 1 इतनी एक official और formal और the exact opposite of ज़ाती and जज्बाती. So we'll see how this plays out in this huge, very official space. अच्छा जी, तो I would like to start by saying, by the way, my name is Yusra Amjad, and for the purposes of this, all you need to know about me is that I am a 30-year-old Pakistani woman. I have always loved girls. I grew up surrounded by girls. I grew up surrounded myself by girliness because that is how I was most comfortable. I went to an all-girls school, and for more than half of my life, I only had female friends. Mera pehla, actual male friendship was probably in my early 20s. So, फिर मैं दुनिया में गई, also in my early 20s, मैंने ये मुहावरा कह देते हैं, मुहावरा सुना, औरत ही औरत की दुश्मन. And I was very confused. And I was wondering if you guys also share my confusion. And I'm going to express that confusion by doing a side-by-side comparison of the worst things that men have ever done to me and the worst things that women have ever done to me throughout my life, okay? I actually wanted to be more interactive. I was going to ask you guys to submit your answers to that question. By you guys, I mean, but I think this hall is not the setting for anyone to share their traumas, except for me. I do it anyway. So let's start with, let's see, my childhood, okay? What is the worst thing that a woman did to me in my childhood? Bachpan mein, what's the worst trauma a woman did to me? So I have this aunt, okay? And मैं बहुत जानबूझकर aunt का लफ्ज़ use कर रही हूँ, अंग्रेज़ी का लफ्ज़, क्योंकि aunt जो है ना, कुछ भी फुप्पो भी हो सकती है, खाला भी हो सकती है, चाची भी हो सकती है, मामी भी हो सकती है, कुछ भी हो सकती है, okay? Which means कि अगर मैं aunt बोलूँगी और खाला को ये video कहीं कोई भेज देगा, I can be like, अरे खाला, मैं तो फुप्पो की बात कर रही थी. अगर फुप्पो को video मिल जाए, then I can say, फुप्पो मैं ममानी की बात कर रही थी असल में, ममानी को मिल जाए, अरे ममानी मैं तो ताई के बारे में बोल रही थी. That's why I'm using the word aunt, ठीक है, ताकि मुझे कहीं आइंदा डांट ना पड़ जाए फुप्पो चाची मामी से. Exactly. उनके घर जाते थे, she just treated me like there was just something very wrong with me compared to, her children who were perfect. Like she would just treat me that everything about me is wrong, from my clothes to my personality. She would make me change my clothes sometimes because like my clothes were just not good enough for her house. Am I the only one who's had a rishtadar like that, by the way? Thank you. I feel so, all the ladies in the audience going. So that wasn't very nice. Obviously, it was not very good for my self-esteem as a young girl. I'm so sorry, by the way, but if there's anyone who can grab me water, I forgot my water bottle. I think I'm about to start coughing. Thank you so much. That's the worst thing a woman probably did to me in my childhood. Thank you so much. Amna is getting me water. This is the most high-profile water I've ever received. So the worst thing that a man did to me, let's change tack, in my childhood was when I was 10 years old, my milkman, Doodwala, tried to sexually molest me. Now, it's very lucky, and it's very important. I had the education from my family that I knew what was happening, so I managed to push him away, create an uproar, and escape from that situation when he started trying to touch me. So I'm very proud of myself for that. I'm very proud of my family. This is why बच्चों से बात करना इतना ज़रूरी है, क्योंकि मुझे पता था, मुझे information थी कि मैंने अपने आप को protect कैसे करना है. So I was able to escape that situation. बहुत शुक्रिया. So that is the worst thing that a man did to me in my childhood. Okay, so let's recap. On the one hand, we have my aunt being kind of a snob and having a superiority complex. And on the other hand, we have attempted child sexual abuse. Does anyone think that one of these things is worse than the other? All right, thank you. I'm glad you agree. Let's move on to my university, okay? So like my adolescence. So the worst thing that a girl did to me in college was, okay, so there was this girl and she just hated me. And she, thank you so much. No, but I'll have muddy sparkling water. आपके हाथ का पानी है, उसकी और बात है. So this girl basically cornered me one day and told me everything that was wrong with me and like yelled at me for 10 minutes. And she did, just to give you an idea of what kind of person I was in college, this girl comes up to me and she's like, Yusra, I didn't like what you said in class last week. And I, without asking her what I said, without waiting to hear what I'm saying sorry for, I was like, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm really sorry, I'm really sorry. I just feel terrible, it was really wrong, I'm really sorry. No idea what I'm apologizing for, okay? But then she did tell me, and honestly, she was a totally valid point. You see, we were literature majors, and I am a poet. If you know anything about me, is that I'm really into poetry. So I was giving a presentation on poetry, and while I was doing that, I we had mentioned a very famous poem, and then no one else in the class had heard of it, so I just said something like, oh God, guys, how can you not have heard of this poem, such a famous poem? How can you be majoring in literature if you haven't heard of this poem? Which is a really arrogant thing to say. It was very obnoxious. I totally, when she said it, I was like, yaar, aise nahi bolna chahiye the, to bahut ek, obnoxious cheez hai. So yeah, she had a very valid point. Except that she didn't stop there. वो अगले कोई 5-10 मिनट उसने खड़े होके जो bully किया है तुम्हें ये भी खराब है ये भी खराब है, just telling me all the ways in which so that all this is didn't like me long before then and just wanted to bully me. So yeah, not very nice of her. The worst thing boys did to me in college was create such an unsafe environment for me on my school campus that I considered dropping out. This is actually the first article that I ever wrote for Dawn magazine. I was afraid to go to certain places on campus just because the boys would hang out there and catcall all the girls. And those were places that I really had to go as a university student, like library, photocopier. Obviously, you have to go to such places as a student to collect your resources to be a successful student. I actually want to point out how important it is to not ignore such things as well, because I did complain about several individuals, and 2 of them were actually suspended for sexually harassing girls. और उसके बाद सब सीधे हो गए. I cannot tell you, अगले 4 साल में, ये मेरे freshman year का किस्सा है, फिर उसके अगले 4 साल में I witnessed my campus become a safer place, and such a safer place for me to walk around in, because my admin was supportive. I know not every admin is supportive. I know not every admin believes girls when they complain about sexual harassment, but mine did, and after that, the campus became so much safer because the boys knew that they could be held accountable. So my college is FC College, by the way. I have to give them a shout out. So I really am grateful to that admin. So let's see, again, recap. On the one hand, we have a girl who was basically bullying me because of her own insecurities, just one day. This wasn't like an ongoing campaign. And on the other hand, harass me purely out because of my gender, to the point where I consider disrupting my own education. Again, I feel like one of these things is worse than the other. And now let's come to my adulthood. So, speaking of men, when I was 25 years old, I lost one of the most significant men in a woman's life, usually my father. And after I lost my father, someone who I thought was my friend, we had been friends for several years, I had organized her entire birthday party the previous year. That's the kind of friends I thought we were. And after my father died, this person, who I genuinely thought was one of my closest friends, stopped speaking to me. Because she didn't want to deal with the drama and the trauma and just the labor and the effort of being there for me. Because she, around that time, had made a new male friend. And she found it very important to be there for this man that she had just met, not the woman that she had already been friends with for several years, who had just lost one of her parents. So this person did not speak to me for a year after I lost my father. And that was really horrible. I was really angry about that for a long time. I really did start feeling like aurat ki dushman hai. That really hurt me, obviously. Wasn't very nice. But now I want to tell you about something that I actually haven't spoken about publicly before, which is the worst thing that a man has done to me in adulthood. So, exactly 2 years and 4 months ago, after living in Pakistan, which is supposed to be, by the way, the third or fourth most dangerous country in the world for women, according to many rankings, I was studying in New York City on a Fulbright scholarship. And it was over here, at the hands of a non-Pakistani, very American white man, that I, for the first time, experienced physical violence at the hands of a man that I was in love with and in a relationship with. So the worst thing that a man has ever done to me, I was 28 years old, the first time in my life, and I want to make it clear, it wasn't a Pakistani man who did this. It was a very progressive American man, right? I experienced intimate partner violence for the first time in my life. The first and only time, because as soon as it happened, I left. So I know it's really, really shitty and traumatic to abandon a friend who has been through a trauma like losing a father. But I can promise you that that does not compare to the trauma of what that man did to me that one night. There are 52,000 pregnant women in Gaza right now. Every day, pregnant women in Palestine are giving birth without anesthetic, without hospital supplies, without any kind of sterile environment, without even enough food and water to keep them healthy. 52,000 pregnant women in Palestine. It's not a woman who's giving the orders that keep these women in this situation. Did Benjamin Netanyahu change his gender identity recently? No? He's still a man? So those 52,000 women who are in the most vulnerable state that a woman can be in and are being constantly tortured, is it a woman doing it to them? The establishment that has wrecked this country's economy and that stole my vote. I am a constituent of NA 128, a victim of large-scale rigging. Was that a woman who stole my right to choose my own leader? Has it been women who have violated this country's sacred constitution and stepped into power that they do not deserve? Has it been women who drove our economy into the ground, making it hard for us to feed our children? Is haqdar aurat hai? Speaking of war, I really want to talk about war, guys. So when women don't agree with each other, okay, we do horrible things. No denying it, bullying, backbiting, gossiping, excluding people, all of those things, abandoning our friends just so we can get validation from a man. Women do terrible things, when we don't agree with each other, we don't like each other. When men don't agree with each other, they gather in the hundreds of thousands with the deadliest weapons that they can find, and they mass murder each other, and whoever murders the most men wins. That's not something women do. The only people you are not supposed to harm in a war are women and children. You're supposed to kill the men. That's the whole point of war. That's what war is. Men invented a legal way to mass murder each other every few decades. And yet, it's so funny. I've never heard anyone say, यार मर्द ही मर्द का सबसे बड़ा दुश्मन है. So I really think that when I hear औरत की सबसे बड़ी दुश्मन है, I'm like, यार, this is what's wrong with society these days, okay? This is feminism gone too far. औरत का जीना हराम करना मर्दों का काम है यार. अगर वो भी हम कर लेंगे, वो बेचारे क्या करेंगे? Ladies, you have to accept that some gifts God has really only given to men, okay? Some glass ceilings simply cannot be shattered. So let's remember, a man's place is in the oppression. A man's place is in the patriarchy. And your place, ladies, is in the sisterhood. Thank you.
Yusra, you definitely deserve the podium. This should have been a performance. Thank you so much for going so in depth and for making yourself so vulnerable. I know, I think you deserved a much bigger, greater audience, and inshallah, I'm sure you will. So carry on your path and sharing your stories. I'm sure it's going to make a difference in somebody's life or the other. And consider entertainment. Consider the media as a major channel for your stories, for sure, because I agree with the fact that some of these statements just become so, जिसे कहते हैं पक्के हो जाते हैं. कुछ मुहावरे, कुछ बातें ऐसी पक्की हो जाती हैं कि वो उसका ख़तरा ये है कि वो एक नैरेटिव बन जाता है और वो बहुत लोग उसको बिलीव करते हैं और किस्म का मैनिफेस्ट भी करते हैं. औरत औरत की दुश्मन होती है. जब आप एक ड्रामा सीरियल में भी अगर वही चीज़ कंफर्म होते हुए देखते हैं तो उस चीज़ पे आपका बिलीफ आ जाता है. And that's very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. And I'm glad you're contesting it and breaking the glass ceiling, as they say. And each one of you are. And I want to congratulate you on all your initiatives and bringing yourselves forward and putting yourself out there like this. So thank you. Any questions in the audience for anyone on the panel? Please, let's take one or two questions and then we can conclude this panel. इनको माइक हम दे सकते हैं, please? Hi, okay. Oh no. Okay, fine. So being limited. All right, thank you so much. बहुत शुक्रिया आप सबका. Thank you.
यार वैसे मैंने देखा है कि तुम्हारी बहन रोजाना मोहल्ले के बस स्टॉप पे खड़ी होती है। मोहल्ले की लड़कियां इतना बाहर निकले अच्छा थोड़ी लगता है। बेहतर होगा कि अपनी बहन को समझा या उसे रोक दे।
मैं क्यों रोकूं उसे? उससे ये इख्तियार हासिल है कि ये फैसला वो खुद करे। देख भाई, हमें सोच बदलने की जरूरत है, लड़कियों को रोकने की नहीं। बल्ब ऑन कर। लो भाई, आ गई रोशनी।
बदलो अपनी सोच को, सबके लिए आवाज दो। बस्ती बस्ती नगरी नगरी एक हो के आवाज दो।
ला भाई पाना लिया।
उस्ताद जी,
हाँ
सुना है कल रात को मोहल्ले में क्या हुआ?
तुम्हें पता है मैं इन बातों में नहीं पड़ता। खैर क्या हुआ, कोई खास बात हुई?
अरे गजब हो गया उस्ताद जी, गजब हो गया। इजाज के गुस्से ने तो हद कर दी। बीवी पे हाथ उठा दिया उसने।